Hello, hello, and welcome here, everyone, to yet another panel with the Canadian Intercollegiate Exhibition 2025. We're excited to get things underway here with a little bit of a dive into esports analysis. My name is Orbital. I'll be your host. With me are two fantastic members in the esports world that I will allow them to have the pleasure of introducing themselves. Let's go ahead and start one after the other. Boys, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Boyce. I'm currently the esports media lead at Fanshawe College, or for the Fanshawe Student Union. I'm a Valorant coach and analyst. I come from the Valorant Game Changer scene, where I've been a coach or analyst for the last 3 years. I've previously competed in collegiate and in the Game Changer scene. My background's also kind of in Counter-Strike, but mostly Valorant. And yeah, I love it. It's awesome.
All right, and then of course, NXL, how are you doing? And welcome. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Nexal. I'm currently the analyst for the Sentinels Marvel Rivals team. It's a generally new game, but I do have background in some Tier 3 Overwatch from a couple years back. I used to coach and play quite a bit. Yeah, and that's it about me.
All right, awesome. I mean, both of you experimenting in different fields as well in terms of the genres and the specifics behind that. So I want to dive a little bit further to start with. Where did you first get your draw into esports? Both of you can answer, of course, but I'm always curious about what got you into esports and how did you find your way into, I guess specifically esports analysis, because that's not always obviously a field I think a lot of people when they think of esports actively dive into at the start.
When I first came to college in 2020 during COVID, and we were obviously all online, I was playing a lot of video games back then because that's all we could really do with friends. And I was playing. I started playing for the Fanshawe Counter Strike team. Competed in that for a year and a half before making the switch to Valorant in 2022. Uh, Played with them for about a year and actually ended up getting benched. I have never been very great player, but I also like I had a good mind for the game, so I started working with some of my friends that were competing in game changers at the time, kind of coaching them, helping them. Then one day I got kind of just a break through a random Twitter DM of, "Hey, do you want to trial for YFP's Game Changers team?" Worked with them for about a year, and then I just kept doing it. I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna take a chance here and see if I like it." And it was probably the best decision I ever made in terms of my career because I had so much fun with it, and it's gotten me where I am now.
Hey, all right, all right. That's awesome to hear. And then for you, Annex specifically, because you stated that you have history back in Overwatch 2 as well. But diving into Marvel Rivals must have not been an easy journey because considering how highly anticipated it was, right?
No, no, it wasn't. Actually, I when I said I was playing Overwatch, I mean like old Overwatch. I kind of took a break
Oh.
before Overwatch 2 came out, but even before then, like my introduction to esports was even before then. I think back in 2015, 2016, I played quite a bit of Counter Strike and got introduced to the esports scene there. I believe it was the famous Cloud9 Summer Run in 2015. That's where I got introduced to esports. Kind of spiraled from there. Played Counter Strike for a bit. Never really came into anything. Then when Overwatch came out, I started to play that. Got good at it. Managed to form a team with a friend from school. Then started to climb my way up from there. Made it to kind of tier 3 back then. I kind of similar to voice. I'm not very mechanically skilled myself, but I do have at least a mind for the game. So I kind of slowly transitioned my way to coaching to try to work my way forward. Did Overwatch for quite a bit, didn't really make too much there. That's why I took a break. Then I started bouncing around just a couple different games, trying to see what the competitive scenes were like. Didn't end up going anywhere from there. But then Marvel Rivals started to come out. I still had some old friends from Overwatch. A lot of the Sentinels roster was actually a lot of the old tier 3, tier 2 players that were still around. Rymazing, Krova, Super Gomez, Armori. Like if you knew their names from before, they became quite good at Marvel Rivals. They were Overwatch players in the tier 2, tier 3 scene. Uh, so I was just hanging around them. I still had contact with them, so I managed to work my way with them into the analyst job for the team back when we were still Nightmare, right as the game started to come around.
Hmm.
And lo and behold, here I am now.
It's been a journey for both of you. So again, congratulations on your spots right now. Now, I want to dive a little bit more because as we are here with Esports Analysis 101, it's an introduction, right? When we talk about esports analysis, I think all three of us were having a slight discussion about it, and what is esports analysis? What does it actually do for a team? And I mean, for those that might be looking at esports as just, hey, it's it's people just hitting keys on the keyboard or using a controller. I mean, that's all there is to it is what they see in their eyes. So, give me a little bit of insight into what exactly esports analysis is and how it's kind of evolved over time. Because we know it's evolved over time. It used to be, just a couple kids throw together, have a team, and run in the tournaments to now being some of the most highly dissected events and, really dissecting just like any other sport or esport out there right now.
I mean, it's definitely changed a lot, obviously, in the last couple of years, especially post COVID and during COVID, with really the boom of esports and its prime time in the last couple of years. And I think what a lot of people don't realize, especially people that might not have grown up during this time and experienced this themselves is it's so much more than just you're sitting at a desk and you're just clicking buttons all day. Like it is mentally taxing. It is you're prone to burnout. There's so many things that can happen to you. It's so much more demanding than a lot of people think, especially trying to compete at the highest level. It's no different than any professional sport where you're dedicating as much of your free time as you possibly can to continue to improve all the time, and especially trying to compete at the top level. Little bits and pieces, they add up in the end. If you're not doing everything you can, someone will beat you out, and that's where being able to have the analytics data and understand that is going to provide the benefit to a team or just an individual.
I wholeheartedly agree, but also I don't think it's necessarily just for the hell of trying to get even higher. I think there's a certain fun to it, to understanding any game and all the small interactions that happen between each of the individual characters, players, the small mechanics that may not be intended by the developers even, that you just find and be able to exploit to get an edge over the team, another team. Yes, it does lead to victory, but I also think there's a certain fun to being able to find that in the first place.
Yeah,
Mm,
definitely to find the little niche things that are like there's so many little interactions, especially I'm sure in rivals, like little interactions between characters that are that little bit is it's cool to know because it's something most people might not, and it's fun to find those little, I don't want to call them Easter eggs, but I think that's the easiest way to get the point across.
It almost sounds like you that you're more on the side of bug hunting than anything else. Hey, what can we use to exploit here? What can we use to run its course? But quite honestly, it is true. Finding that little edge in there is the way to victory. And how much of an edge is there in figuring out these small bugs? Is that the primary goal, or is it also figuring out, the best way to run a team, compositional wise or strategy wise? I'm guessing this also falls under the umbrella of esports analysis.
I mean,
Uh,
for bugs, like finding little things if they're considered bugs, at least in the Valorant scene, um, where we kind of just go on the rule of it's never a ban the first time. Um, yeah, if you're the first one to find
I
it,
love
you're
that
fine.
rule.
If it's not in the rule book yet, you're fine. And it's happened many times. There one of the biggest things was there was for Valorant on there's one map where there was a tiny little piece of a wall that stuck up slightly higher in the mesh, but it wasn't visible in game. And when you threw an agent's ability, it would go flat and then up and back down over. So you could peek through it and see through, but they couldn't see the other way. And people did it for months because
Oh,
it wasn't in the rule book. Things like that count to
yeah,
a point.
that's true. That's true. Annex, anything to say about that? Are the bugs in there, or do they get remedied pretty quickly, especially with how new Marvel Rivals has been in entering and kind of all the viewership that's come with it as well?
the developers are pretty on top of it, but it's still quite new game on on the engine, so we still do quite find quite a few bugs, especially when it comes to the net code. So trying to play around some of these issues is more or less what we get at. It's not necessarily trying to find the edge, but trying to play around like certain interactions won't exactly happen on the server properly if you play it too fast. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
It
Uh,
makes sense. It makes sense. And again, that's not, of course, your entire job, as there is so much more that goes into esports analysis. So I want to dive in a little bit further into this because when it comes to esports analysis, I know we've always heard, overall analysis when you're analyzing the game. There's also positional analysis, analyzers, those that, or analysts, I apologize. When we take a look at, at least I come from League of Legends side, when we get into top mid jungle, you have positional analysts that go over, certain champions and the like. What exactly do you tend to focus on as in your specific world as analyst? Is there a specific area that you focus on, or are you more all around, you encompass just about all the analyzing and try and keep eyes on everything within the game and within the teams as well?
Uh,
You can
me
go ahead, Annex.
Yeah, thanks. Me personally, I've tended to take more on the number side. Uh, Crimzo, who was our coach but now is our tank player in Marvel Rivals, he was the coach, then transitioned to player during this season. So I was working alongside him quite a bit. My job was kind of to break down some of the numbers that appeared in the game. So you know how you see on the scoreboard sometimes, see that guy over there, he has very little damage for playing DPS. That guy must suck. That's not always the case. Sometimes it's the case of a certain character that you're playing. It has just generally lower damage numbers, but it comes in certain bursts that makes it quite useful. I think the perfect example would be Wolverine, because a lot of the time you're not going to be directly in the fight all the time because you're a melee character. You have to find your windows and then understanding when you need to go in there and do your burst. And that's where your damage numbers come from. It's overall a lot lower than what you would compare to someone like Squirrel Girl, who's able to constantly pump out damage numbers from the backline very safely, very consistently. But it's not as useful as finding that one burst window. And understanding that and interpreting some of these end stats, it's quite useful. Where are you lacking? Where are these damage numbers coming from? Are they useful? Do we need to switch certain characters to fill out certain holes that the composition has? Or is someone lagging behind a bit because they don't understand the character? And sometimes that reveals itself in the end stats, and it's kind of my job to interpret that and figure out, is this a red herring? Is this useful? So, but to be fair, Marvel Rivals is such a new game. We don't have access to some of these APIs that some of the other games have. So, kind of stuck with some of the end scoreboards. I'm really hoping that at some point, NetEase releases tools for us to get to these more advanced end stats. But until then, I'm working by hand quite a bit trying to figure it out because it's still quite new.
I was actually going to ask, obviously, with it being a new game, uh, in terms of the numbers, are you basically having to manually gather all of that for rivals? So, like in Valorant, we have Run It Back, which is the
Yep.
open, not that's not the API, but it feeds off of the API to give us most of our data and analytics in like the tier 2, tier 3 scene. Tier 1 has Grid, which is something different, which I'm not too familiar of, but it's just more detailed. I was just curious if you are you having to gather all of that yourself for rivals?
Yeah, it is quite a pain whenever I have to do it. I try to avoid it just because it is so labor intensive trying to gather all the numbers manually. I know there's a couple of friends I have, they've tried to run certain things where they pull from the Steam API from profiles, but that isn't really an option in tier 1 just because everyone has to keep their profiles private, want to keep these scrims a secret, can't be leaking those. Uh There is some tools, but NetEase also has outlawed some of them, specifically ones to do with ranked, but I think that's outside the scope of what we're trying to talk about because
Mhm.
that's just ranked.
Yeah.
We're talking about like something entirely different. But yeah, we don't have those kind of tools yet, unfortunately.
Oof.
That's pretty unfortunate because I know, especially for Valorant and Counter Strike, like we've had that for the majority of the life of the pro scene, especially CS with VODs like being public, the demos being built into the game. There's so much more analysis. Still waiting for Valorant to give us a replay system, but having the
We've
API
been
and
waiting for
everything,
ages for that, by the way. That
it's
is
coming. It's they
painful in its
said it's
own.
coming. It's coming.
The same way
Soon,
GTA
soon
6 is coming
TM.
at some point, right?
Yeah, soon TM. That's all we get. But it makes, especially trying to do analysis, especially if you're someone that's new to this and you're just trying to find a way in, having that like API access and being able to see the data and interpret it either through an algorithm or through some math in Google Sheets or Excel or something, if that's how you prefer to work. I prefer to just be able to organize the numbers, but it makes it so much easier, especially if you're someone that's new.
Yeah.
Well,
And real quick, before we let Annex roll on, because I am very interested. Real quick, go ahead and explain what API is for those that may be getting into this and trying to learn all the lingo and wanting to dive a little bit further, because obviously the API is very important to analytics and trying to gather all that information at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Oh,
So yeah, API is like it's a more of a coding term. It's just the way that you can interface with a data set that's coming from either the publisher or whatever platform you're using. It's kind of just used as a generic term to say how you're interfacing with that data. So if you're writing a script to, for example, run it back, we is built through a Discord bot is how the public access works. And there's a Discord bot where it's already hooked into the API, and all you're doing is putting a query of we want to find this whoever played this composition, these three agents on this map between these two dates. You can choose whatever they were playing against, and as long as it's in the publisher or platform's database, the API takes your inputs and is basically just sorting and searching for everything that matches it and then replying with whatever they find.
And Annex, what were you gonna say before we dove into APIs?
nothing too useful. I'm just thinking Overwatch didn't have a replay viewer for quite a long time. I'm pretty sure Valorant is still on pace to be able to beat Overwatch's no VOD reviewer record.
What's
So,
Overwatch's? Now I'm curious.
for a while, original Overwatch didn't have a VOD reviewer. I think for a bit we got a little bit of VOD viewer with the Overwatch League. They released one purely for the Overwatch games. Then a little bit after, like a year after that, we finally got a full-fledged one. I think it took something like 3-4 years officially. Not really sure how long Valorant's track record's going now.
Well,
Yeah.
it was beta in 2020, so we're pushing. Did they just have their 5-year anniversary or 4 years since first launch? Just happened.
Don't do this to me. Don't do this to me, boys. Don't do this.
It's crazy to say for me, man. It feels
Yeah.
not like that was 5 years ago, but oh well,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was 5 years ago. Oh gosh, the game's been
Yeah,
around for too long. Oh,
we're old.
woo.
Yeah,
Red.
I mean, especially just having no replay system, like as a coach in Valorant, is like
Mhm.
it's so frustrating because obviously for private scrims, like we hide match history, no one can see it because you can still um even built into Valorant there's no replay system, but the basic data is still recorded. Basically a data point's recorded every time there's a kill, so you can go back through your timeline and see every round where was everyone on the map when that person got killed or when they got a kill. But between those times, if there's a minute between, you see absolutely nothing. So trying to review after a match, you can only see whatever you've recorded from the coach seat unless you get all 5 of your players to record POVs and you feel like watching all 5 of them at the same time, which is kind of hard to do or very time consuming. But not being able to see the opponent's POV either is just it's something I'm not used to from CS where we can see everything, every perspective. Where did this person catch this half-second timing that completely lost us the round? We can't see that. So it's a mystery of, okay, how did we just lose that? And if we have no data for that entire 60 seconds, you'll never know.
Yeah, it's kind of lost to the wayside. And I want to dive a little bit further because you bring up a very good point. Having the eyes in the sky, or you mentioned having the 5 viewpoints of the players specifically, and I want to ask, how that differentiates. Just the players themselves, if they were to go into the analytics and just go into trying to break down their own game. What's the difference between having those players only versus having someone like yourself, boys, or like yourself, Annex, when it comes to like Marvel Rivals, especially with so much going on? What is the difference, and how much do you think it elevates a team having an analyst versus just doing it, with the players themselves, or with having what I would call the bare minimum: no coach, no analyst, and just kind of the players themselves doing what they can.
Mm, I I think when it comes to Marvel Rivals, like we're fortunate enough to have a replay viewer, so that even in all the very hectic Marvel Rivals fights, you got a lot of abilities and effects going on all at once in one fight. So you're not going to be able to all interpret that as a player in that fight all at once. But when you go into that replay viewer, maybe you're able to look at things here and there, like slow it down, break down like who was where, really being able to do that. But also you still are part of the game, even as a player watching it back. Maybe you're too focused on one thing. I think it's important that as a coach or analyst, you're the outside perspective on removed from the game. You're not too affected by the emotions that went on in a fight, win or lose. Maybe you're a little more as a player, you're a little more affected. Like, hey, I really missed this one ability that I could have hit, and that's going to weigh on you when you're looking back on a fight. As an analyst and coach, you're the outside perspective. You don't have that weighing on you, so you can take a little more of an objective stance to it. Of course, you're still affected by the success or loss and failure of your team, but I think you have a lot more easier time, and you're expected to have that more objective view to say, here's where we went wrong, or we need to take a closer look at this in particular.
As much as any player can be object have a external point of view themselves and try to be unbiased, it's human nature that you're always going to try to avoid finding, if the problem is you're going to be hesitant to admit it or find it. And like, you'll occasionally find people that aren't that way, but it always helps to have a viewpoint that can come from outside of the five, so it's not generating an internal conflict, especially from a management perspective. Just like following up on the one of the other panels that was happening about the team management, um, being able to avoid that conflict and have it come from an unbiased outside source is just so much easier for the team dynamic and developing that conversation, rather than the another player taking it as, oh yeah, you just don't want to take the blame for it, so you're blaming me. Well, if the person doesn't have any bias towards that, it's a lot easier to have that conversation and avoid the confrontation of it.
Yep, trying to make sure that you provide that balance in there and try and make sure everyone understands that you're all coming from the same area. You want to improve, right? That's what it kind of sounds like at the end of the day. Everyone wants to improve, and that's the important factor. Now, moving into a little bit of a different area, we talked a lot about the teams and about specifically, making those adjustments, especially post game, right? Talking about, post game analytics and how those numbers appear. I want to dive a little bit more into like the pre-game because, of course, analytics isn't just the players, but also the game itself. When you dive down into it, there's a lot of agents, for Valorant. There's a lot of, a lot of balances as well. When we talk about weapons for Marvel Rivals, it's the characters, the swath of heroes that come out, the release patterns between all the heroes that come out. I mean, if we're talking about the most recent, you're talking about like the Fantastic Four that just came out and the balancing that comes about it. And I'm sure your jobs also kind of encompass that value of how much can we actually pull from these numbers? Can we pull from, the agents or the heroes and the like? So, my question to you at that point, how hard do you go on releases or on characters? Is that a staple of your job to determine, the highest output, right? Is it part of the job to analyze every single maybe new character, map change, the dynamics? Are those included within esports analysis?
I'm gonna love talking about this because Riot Games and releasing broken characters on launch. Let's go.
All right, I hit the button. I hit the button. That's a good one.
Right. Yes, it's going to be pretty key, especially as soon as they're available for competition. Riot did just release the second last agent, which was probably the most meta breaking agent they've ever released. After we do a nerf where we're not allowing people to ping things through a smoke anymore to avoid being able to just spam the ground and see where they are. And then we release an agent that you click a button on a map, and if they're in that spot, they die. That's it. Like, it's this sounds like I'm making a joke out of it, but how do you analyze that? Like, it's literally you click the death button and they died. It worked. So being able to counter that, honestly, it's more figuring out, okay, how can we play against that than play with it when stuff like that happens. Um, it is fun to figure out, but it's also very frustrating, especially where Riot loves making character changes right before the seasons begin, instead of giving us time to adjust to it. And being able to adapt on the fly and find, okay, where are we going to lose the value versus is it still worth even playing this person? Where can we get the value back out of them using different utility or different agent? Um, that's probably the most critical part for like focusing on release cycles and update cycles, just because of how frequent it happens, and it's usually not good timing.
I guess with Marvel Rivals, jury's still out on what NetEase is, what kind of developer they are in terms of hero and map releases. So far, we've gotten quite a few maps. Nothing's been too broken. Heroes not too broken as well. They're being decent about some of these changes and hero releases because we are also planning to get like a new character every half patch now, or half season. Recently, most recent characters were the Fantastic Four and Emma Frost. Like those are fairly good characters, maybe not necessarily so on launch, kind of 50-50 on whether they're good or not. But also, we do have to consider an additional part of Marvel Rivals that isn't part of Valorant is our character ban and protect screen, because that's an entire aspect of the game that we have that's not wasn't there in Overwatch. I believe that they're recently adding that to Overwatch, and it's not present in Counter Strike or Valorant. Uh, but they released an entirely new. They've been changing quite a bit on how these bans and protects work. So that's also our job to figure out, like, are these characters too overpowered that we want to get rid of them? Are these characters that we want to play within our composition, so we need to protect them to avoid the other team from banning it? It's quite a bit of gamesmanship there on that screen. If you ever played MOBAs before, like, it has that kind of element. But it's fairly new. They just pretty much yesterday, actually, they released a brand new way that they're approaching the bans and protects. So that's an entirely new game we have to figure out. So no news on that, but we'll figure it out. Could be good, could be really bad.
I'm actually a personal proponent of the ban system in Valorant. I mean, one of the first tournaments I ever played in myself was actually an agent. It was the first Riot approved tournament that had agent bans. But this was actually back in 2021, where we had like half the agents we had now, and I
Yep.
still thought it was fun. And now we have so many more, and so many people that are just like, I don't really want to play against them on this map. And I think Valorant's almost at the point where we need that. It could be now and still probably be fine. But I think that we might even see it come in like 2026 for next year for Valorant. I'm hoping, because it would allow the game to shift to stop being something that there's one meta that everyone's playing and force people to actually adapt and do more than one thing. It would also just boost the value of having that analysis too.
Yeah. It's a world in of its own. And so with the thought of, layered in the actual game itself, you also have to analyze. I mean, anyone knows you have to kind of analyze your opponent before you go into a match with them, and breaking down, how the opposing team plays, how they decide to run the game, their agents, their heroes that they select. A question that I've always thought about, and I'm sure some other people are curious, which do you prep more for? Do you prep for your opponent, or do you prep for the game, like the numbers game? Do you prep more for, understanding your opponent, or are you more focused on, well, what's the current game state? How do we play our own game? Or is it a fairly even mix of either end, you would say?
I think it's going to be a mix of both at some point, and it's going to depend on what's the situation. Like, am I preparing for a grand final against the number one ranked team? Like, in that case, I'm going to be focusing definitely a lot on them and how can we play into them, because they're number one for a reason. Whereas if it's a group stage game and we're playing the fourth seed of the group, I'm going to be more focused on, okay, like, let's make sure we're sticking on our fundamentals and we're not screwing up, because that's how we lose this game. Whereas if it's a game you're coming in as the underdog, you're going to want to focus still on your fundamentals, but being able to adapt to what the other team is doing. And you can't really, I don't think it's an easy enough answer to just say, what should you focus on more? Because it's always going to depend on the situation.
Yeah, personally, I've always found focus on your own game quite a bit more efficient, but that's only to do with the fact that sometimes finding information on your opponent can be quite a bit scarce. So you don't always want to spend that time trying to dig up everything you can on an opponent that you probably aren't going to find in the first place. Because trying to find that info pretty hard nowadays.
Yeah, it's probably
Everything's
a
very
little different for Valorant, where we've got the API access to view all the games and see, especially with how it's a lot more slow, it's a lot more strategic, it's less I don't want to say that Rivals is like utility spam, but to me it feels that way because I'm used to a game that has significantly less going on for the majority of the game. Um, so getting that information, especially on macro, where like macro movements is huge compared to just the micro ability of shooting them better than they shoot you. It matters so much in team play.
Yeah, when it comes to Marvel Rivals, like definitely there's a lot less macro map movement compared to like Valorant and CS because it's very small maps compared to like how far you have to run, how people interact with one another. It's all like you have like 50 meters of empty space that you're trying to like slowly clear through, rather you're just trying to choose a direction and run at it. But I think there's a little more nuance. You definitely find the nuance in how teams approach team fights. Uh, I guess it would be more comparable to like how your teams would figure out how to take sites. Like we're trying to figure out like on certain parts of the map, how do these 6-on-6 fights play out, and if the enemy team like does anything in particular different. But also there's nuance when it comes to like that pick ban screen I was talking about earlier. How trying to interpret like how is this opponent trying to ban out our own thing, and what are they trying to go for in the draft, and how can we try to exploit that?
Yeah,
And just trying to
learning
understand.
them.
Sorry.
No, you're okay. You're okay. I'm always very interested in that because you mentioned the idea of almost pinpointing with the stats themselves, saying, hey, they really like to play, maybe a certain hero or a certain specific line as well, and figuring out what you cannot play against versus what you don't want to play against, I think is something that we can talk about because I come from League of Legends, right? 170 champions, only about 10 bans across the entire board, and I'm sitting there like, we can ban 10 total and only 5 per side. And I'm like, I don't know what to do here, quite honestly. I pray to God you don't have a one trick in there or anything of the sort. And that's kind of the fun part because then you get a deep dive the analysis of, what's meta versus what's in the opponent's champ pool. What's the go-to standard versus, what can we almost cross-reference, and it's so much analyzing that I have a high amount of respect for anyone that wishes to dive into that field, willing to sift through all this information in front of you there. So, um, what would each of you say is the hardest aspect of being an analyst in esports, in requiring this esports analytics and being able to dive in? What is the hardest part of your job? You would think, or the one that is most, I guess, if maybe not the hardest, but the most taxing, depending on how you want to view it.
I think it's going to depend on what game you're working with and
Mm.
like what access you have, comparing something with a public API versus something where your data collection is being done manually. Um, for something like Valorant, where I come from, the thing I find hardest for me, not hardest, but what I would say would be hardest for someone coming into it, is understand that even though you're going off of numbers, sometimes the numbers aren't going to be the whole story. Like correlation does not equal causation type thing, where just because you're seeing, okay, this comp, you're getting these numbers and not looking deeper. This comp beat this comp 80% of the time, but you never bothered to see that it was Sentinels playing some group of nobodies in a Mickey Mouse tournament. Like the numbers are not going to back it up, and you need to be able to take the numbers and combine it with your own, let's just call it common sense, and understand it properly in a way that you're not just going off of, this says this, that means it must be true because the number is over 50%. That means it works. And a lot of people will fall into that trap of, I saw this team do this once against this team and they destroyed them. It was so good. And then they'll try and run it in like a premier tournament and get smoked and they wonder what happened because it's a completely different situation, and you need to be able to translate that into whatever your situation is instead of just relying on the numbers to tell the story.
I couldn't have said it better myself. There's definitely nuance beyond what the numbers say because we're generally speaking, esports is relatively new. We haven't really figured out all the little quirks and quacks of every single game and how exactly we're supposed to approach it analysis wise. So just being able to look beyond the numbers and use just a little bit of common sense and understand how these two maybe multiple things interact with one another is definitely very, very important and sometimes tough.
Mhm. I mean, it's extremely tough. There are some people that play what I like to call instinct style, that they don't even care about the stats, and you're just like, you know, if that's what you want to do, go for it. I'm not going to stop you, but analytics are going to help you a lot more in understanding, as you said, the connections and a lot of those variances there is very important. Um, with everything that we talked about, I'd love to get into a little bit more fun time, as we do have a little question from the chat. And by the way, if you do wish to go ahead and ask about the chat, feel free to as well. We are always taking questions from anywhere and everywhere. So if you're in chat, if you're watching, you want to ask these guys, these very experienced esports analysis analysts, anything, feel free to go ahead. We have a question coming in from Ghoulies, I believe. So I believe this one's a little bit of a tag over to you, Boyce. What is your personal agent and map bans to come out here? I'm guessing this is, what is your personal go-to agent or map ban?
I mean, especially like talking. I was just talking about the agents needing to maybe get a ban system for Valorant. I don't really have a preference, and it's obviously going to depend on the current situation. I would have said Teo, the most recent broken one that I was talking about, but Riot beat me to the punch, and he's no longer useful, so I don't have that opinion anymore. Um, a lot of the especially Valorant maps they've all kind of got a gimmick. Um, Personally, just because I don't enjoy playing it in ranked. Fracture, I think, is miserable. Solely personal preference,
That's so real
and
right there.
it's
That's
always,
so
especially
real.
as an analyst and as a coach, it's going to depend on like just because you hate it doesn't mean you suck at it. But
Yep.
in ranked, I hate it. In competition, if my team's good, then they can play it. Because I don't care if you hate the map. If you're good at it, you're gonna play it because that's what you're supposed to do.
Forced to do. Okay, why do you hate Fracture? Because I know why I hate Fracture. Why do you hate Fracture specifically?
Specifically in ranked, I have nothing against it in competition. It's just never been my map. I didn't like it when it came out. Uh, it's annoying to play in ranked because at least if you have a basic understanding, you can play any of the other maps the same way. You hold there's only 2 ways or 3 ways into the site. You hold it. That's it. Fracture, people don't understand. Hey, they can come the other direction. They can come behind you. Like trying to get, you'd think with 5 people holding 4 things would be easy, right? Wrong. I don't know why. I just don't like it. That's
You're
my
you're
rant.
sure it's you're sure it's not because you may or may not have fallen off a zip line one too many times, right? No, no, never happened. All right, that's fair. You know what? I fell off one too many times. That's why I hate the map. So, gotta agree though. There are some questionable things about Fracture, but overall, gotta agree. It's interesting to see everyone's personal hates or dislikes about the game. Anix, over to you. Question to you: do you have a particular hero? I guess we'll say for Marvel Rivals. Do you have a particular hero that you personally will always ban if you get the chance, or I guess a map or map type that you personally would ban out all the time?
Ooh. Map type right now, I'd have to go with right now. We only have 3 map
Yep.
types right now. If I had to choose one, I would choose right now King of the Hill. I think it's a little bit too short right now uh, compared to all the rest of the maps. Really short. If you end up losing the point, it's kind of a coin flippy, to say the
Mhm.
least. Like all the Marvel Rivals maps, I don't have too much of a gripe with like all the designs, but just how fast and how coin flippy some of the King of the Hill maps can get, I gotta choose that one. And in terms of the hero, let's see. Like every single Marvel Rivals hero has their like own little annoyance to them. Like for example, rank Spider-Mans. Like you always gotta be a little bit careful of those because they can just come in, one shot you, then immediately leave. Kind of like a full like it just takes a second and it's very annoying just because they're only on your screen for 1 second. If I had to choose one purely in scrims, I might have to
I would
choose.
say also in your personal ranked experience, in your own personal experience of trying to play.
Yeah, I might have to say ranked in. I'm just gonna choose. You know what? I'm gonna choose flanking Jeff in ranked just because he's so hard
Not
to
my
kill.
boy, not my boy, my man. No.
He has such a small hitbox when he goes into swim that he's impossible to kill when he wants to be, and then he always just does chip damage to your backline. And in ranked, they're never gonna be able to turn around to shoot at him, so they're just gonna slowly get chipped down and slowly die. And now you waste a minute trying to push the cart, and you get nowhere because you're out of healing. But also in scrims, just because he's been around for so long, been such a staple character that I kind of want to see a change, I'm gonna have to choose Groot. He's been one of the meta tanks for so long in ranked, or non-ranked in pro tier that you want to see kind of a change. His walls are very hard to kill and can easily exploit your team if you're not playing around it. Uh, he has easily one of the most impactful ults in the game, being able to set up for entire team wipes. Uh,
Yeah.
and he has such a big damage output for being a tank.
For a guy that only says 3 words, it is highly impressive for sure. It's very very frustrating. We had another question over from Ghoulies as well. As we have gotten all the hates out of the way, they do want to dive a little bit more into maybe a little bit more collaborative field. Ghoulies asked, how often do esports analysts collaborate with casters and observers? If so, what does it look like? My assumption is, do you bring? Well, we'll start with just, do you guys ever collaborate with casters and observers within esports? I guess we'll start there.
Me personally, obviously like working with Fanshawe, we do like I'll work with a lot of our casters, especially for Valorant, just to kind of help them understand what's happening with the teams. It was a lot easier when I was coaching the teams, and I could just be like, "Yep, this is what we're gonna do. So if you see this, that's what's gonna happen," and just kind of give them the inside. But if you look at the pro scene, and like the VCT hosts and everything, you're bringing in a lot of past players or past coaches to come in and give that insight. And Valorant has a lot of great analysts on the desk. The Plat Chat crew, a lot of them talk like they explain it very well to people that might not have a high level of understanding themselves. Um, and there's a lot of great minds for the game that get brought in to talk about it. I think it's a different type of analyst because you're still taking a concept that might be foreign to someone and trying to explain it to them so they can understand it, but you're explaining it in a different context of where you're trying to get improvement versus you're trying to understand why someone did this. They're more the aftermath than beforehand.
Alex?
Uh, I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to answer this question. I've personally had no real experience when it comes to these sort of things,
Mm.
especially in Marvel Rivals. Like we're pretty young scene. But I guess biggest reference right now is our most run tournament is Rivals Fight Night right now. Like that kind of crew there with DP, Puckett, Uber, Jake, Hex. I'm sure I'm forgetting a couple others that's been on the panel, but they do a pretty good job of it. It Marvel Rivals is, to be quite frank, very hectic, so it's kind of hard to analyze in the moment, but they're between segments on it. You're kind of trying to break down each team fight to be able to help the viewers understand what exactly happened on this particular team fight because you're probably not getting all the information you want in the moment. So being able to just have a quick look back at that, understand and appreciate all the little plays that went on to create a team fight win, That's usually where an analyst shines in on a caster desk.
Yeah. And to go a little bit further, I guess, I think it's always, understood that esports analysts, there's a difference between that and say like a color caster or an on-desk analyst, right? The diving of information, the providing of information with an on-desk analyst versus say a team esports analyst, going over the data and the like. How much, if you were to be asked by say someone like an on-desk analyst, maybe on the off season or in a little bit of time in between matches, how much information, I guess, would you be willing to share to an on-air desk talent? So, you're maybe read into your own team, maybe what you would like to do. Is that stuff that you would be willing to output for a stream to allow them to be like, oh, I have like insider information type of thing? Or is that generally stuff that's just like, we don't want to work on that because we want to keep it for our own team, right? We want to keep it on our own side. We don't want to give any advantage over, if that makes sense.
I think it's gonna be it's gonna depend on the situation. Like if it's
Sure.
an impartial caster, like a league hosted caster just asking a question in an interview, obviously I don't see a reason why we wouldn't answer most questions. But if you're at the top level and you're preparing to, like, you're in VCT, you got a grand final against G2 next week, you're probably not going to answer the question about, so what was your decision making on the macro to move there? Like, why did you fake be in that situation? You're not going to answer that question.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. You're trying to be vague as possible, but you also gotta, as much as we don't like to admit it, this is like something driven by the fans. So you gotta give a little bit of breadcrumbs here and there without like kneecapping your own team. So maybe like saying we could do like this a little bit better, but it
Sure.
doesn't really mean too much, but it kind of sounds like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's only so much you can give without giving away the whole playbook, and it's a scary. I don't want to say slippery slope, but it is a little bit of scare. I mean, there was I forgot which worlds it was, but there was a moment for League of Legends where
Ooh.
I believe one of the coaches or one of the analysts actually went on the world's desk and started just trying to talk about one of the teams. Hey, I had some thoughts about the team. They actually started, I guess, going over almost everything in the coach's playbook that they were told, supposedly in confidence, and it got very close to getting out of hand. So there is that layer of understanding that, hey, can't say too much, but you want to give a little. You want to give a little back to the fans there. So I love the answer that you both gave. We're coming up on the end of the hour. We have about 10 minutes left. So before we do, there's one more question that I would like to offer. Just for a little bit of funsies. Currently, we talked about the fact that both of you primarily, Boyce, you do Valorant primarily, and then for NX, you primarily do Marvel Rivals. Is there a game that, if you were given the chance, you would like to try and get into deep esports analytics? If so, which would it be? And is there a game that you will never touch with a 100-foot pole?
For me, I would love to get involved in Dota 2. I think the kind
Oh,
of
really?
I think I have a lot of appreciation to how they approach drafts. It seems quite a complicated piece between 7 bands, 5
Mhm.
picks, and quite a back and forth, and still evolving. That kind of aspect of Dota 2 on top of like how the macro gets played, the item choices, you have such unique builds that each player kind of understands on how they have to build compared to the opponent's composition and how they're playing. I think there's a lot of ins and outs on how you're supposed to react to it, especially if you're thinking in the game at that moment. I have a lot of appreciation to what goes on there, so I'd love to be able to learn that. And if I were to shoot, I don't think I have an esport that I really wouldn't want to touch too much. Mm, as an analyst, at least, maybe as a player, I'm gonna say Rainbow Six just because it seems like it's too precise gameplay for me.
Mm.
But that's about it. I have nothing but appreciation for like any single esport and what goes into it.
Yeah. I just have to say, before we go to you boys, I am surprised that Dota 2 was brought up because that is something that, at least on my caster side, there are a lot of people that are like, we don't want to touch Dota 2 or, don't want to touch one of the big MOBAs because of how much information is circulated in there. Like, MOBAs tend to have some of the largest data banks of base static information, itemization, character knowledge, pathway for the trees, abilities, right? Like these are all, it's such a large information basket that the fact that you sat here and even said, hey, I want to do Dota 2, it should be highly, highly respected right there.
Hey, I'm a glutton for punishment, if nothing else.
That's a little bit too real there. Boys, what you got?
Honestly, I don't even know if I have an answer to that one. I enjoy Valorant, and I haven't really been doing much analytic stuff outside of more in the terms of like educational or for content purposes. Recently, I've loved casting League the times I've been able to cast, but I feel like there's way too much going on in that game, and I don't have nearly enough personal knowledge to make that ever happen. But in
Yeah.
terms of casting, I like it. It's there's a lot to learn, which I do find fun. Um, I don't know. I like Valorant. I don't think there's any I wouldn't touch. Um, at least none I can think of. But if I wouldn't touch it, I probably haven't thought of it yet. Like I like games. I don't know if I could ever touch Overwatch. Like I like playing it, but games like that, there's just too much going on for me to feel like I'm gonna get much value out of it. I prefer the more tactical stuff than just
Mhm.
kind of mobbing at each other.
Yeah. I mean, I can get behind that as well. When you take a look at the different styles of esports, it also draws vastly different data, right? You're taking a look at, what do you analyze, and some of that is setup. You take a look at the pregame setup or the pre-round setup, if you will, and you have to divert a lot of knowledge in there. When you talk about League of Legends, it's consistently different data. It's the same with Dota 2, right? It's a live game the entire time. There's no real stopping. There's no real changes in there. And then when you get to Overwatch or Marvel Rivals, it's almost it's very quick paced action changes. When you're talking about maybe hero swaps in there, when you have to swap around, or when you select, I should say, I do apologize. When you do take those selections, or when you round a corner, something changes. The style of the battle changes. So. Um, it's respectable that both of you definitely love your esport, and it sounds, even though NX, we were talking about Dota 2 and all, it still sounds that you wouldn't give up Marvel Rivals for anything. So dedication to the craft at the end of the day, right? um, so I guess one of the final things to those that are interested in esports analytics and how to dive into it, what would be your main pieces of advice to those maybe diving in, whether from a player perspective or from just someone just wanting to get into it, right? Maybe this is their first foray into esports. Are there any tips and tricks that you would give? Any helpful advice that you'd like to offer, or anything to maybe watch out for when getting into esports analytics?
I think if you're trying to, it depends on what your goal is. If you're trying to do analytics for yourself and like improving in like trying to find a team for yourself or just getting better at ranked, just start VOD reviewing. Like watch yourself back, make notes on yourself, like take so many notes. You should never not be doing it, but focus on your personal improvement, obviously. But if you're looking for a team, especially right now, or if you're just looking to like build connections for when you want to find a team, I'd honestly recommend people to look into making more educational type content around analytics. You see a lot of people doing breakdown videos of VCT strats and everything. If you have a background in that, it's something you're interested in, start breaking down pro games that you watch and see, okay, see if I can understand why they did this. And if you find that you can understand it well, then great. That's exactly what you're going to want if you're going to be joining a team to do it. But starting with the content also gives you the ability to explain it to a group of people that might not understand the concept, which is a huge part of being an analyst, is being able to communicate what you're finding and have other people understand it.
Yeah.
For me, I think first off, you need to have appreciation for whatever game you're going to try to do. Of course, they're all very different. So choosing one and going down that pathway, of course, there's going to be some games fairly adjacent to it, but for the most part, you're going to be sticking to one game. you need to have an appreciation for it because you're going to be putting some numerous hours to look at possible replays, pro matches, and maybe even trying to get your foot in through the bottom front door, but you have to start off at the bottom step. So trying to work your way through that, you're going to put some number of hours into it. It's just not going to be like 1 or 2 hours maybe. Like to get good at it, you're going to have to put the elbow grease in. And it's not going to be fun if you don't have an appreciation for the game that you're doing it, just like any kind of job in the world. You don't want it to feel like you're pulling hair and it's the most painful thing in the world. Like for me personally, like I I sometimes get bored of games here and there and jump out of it as my colored history with jumping into from different game to game. But at some point you kind of find your match and that's how you get good at it because you put in the hours to it. You start to appreciate the little things that you find there and being able to help others do the same. I think that's probably the most important thing that I could recommend to anyone trying to get into analysis or anything similar in esports.
Of course, and it's highly appreciated as well. Making sure to have a healthy love for the craft and making sure that you know how to properly communicate your thoughts moving forward. I want to say again, Boyce and NX, thank you so much for joining us here on the panel for the CIE 2025. We appreciate your time and efforts when it goes into esports analytics, and thank you for your time here on this panel just as well. I want to leave just some slight final thoughts. Where can we find you, Boyce? I know you said that you did some analytics and content out there as well. Where can we find you? Just go ahead and let us know.
You can find me on Twitter, boys_cs. I don't stream anymore, so that's basically the only place you're gonna find literally anything that has to do with me.
All right, fair enough. And Annex?
I don't personally stream too much, but our Sentinels Marvel Rivals team, tomorrow at 1 p.m. Pacific or 4 p.m. Eastern, we are participating in a Shroud tournament, a
Ooh.
1-day Shroud tournament. So going to support us there if you have a chance.
Hey, all right, all right. Well, with that being said, thank you so much for both of you joining us here on the panel. Before we do go ahead and dive on out, I want to give a big shout out to again CIE. The Canadian Intercollegiate Exhibition has been going on for the last about 4 days now, and it's been very, very fun. Watch League of Legends as well as I believe Overwatch 2 play out tonight. Will actually be Marvel Rivals, which you'll see just in a little bit. Lastly, though, I do want to give a big shout out to all the panelists throughout. We've actually had quite a few different panels go on, from esports infrastructure to careers in gaming and esports. We've had the state of esports education as well as student leaders in esports. There's so much extra information out there that I highly recommend that you go back through. Go ahead and check out all the different panels if you're interested in esports, what it means to be in esports, and the different paths within as well, not just as a player, but beyond. I also want to give a big shout out because later on, a little bit down the road, I believe on Monday, we'll be having a charity show match that'll be going on between a lot of the casters, a lot of the analysts, and some that may or may not play the games, and that is being put on by the CIE. Big shout out to the sponsors that are making that happen. Solaris as well as Strawberry and Egg. Both of these groups have made it possible to go ahead and put on the show match for your viewing pleasure. That'll be on Monday, May 19th. I want to give a big shout out once again to BMO, of course, BMO they are running a contest for CIA participants. If you're interested in that, go ahead and type !contest and complete the form below to meet with a BMO representative and be entered to win one of 5 $20 digital Steam gift cards. Of course, if you want to know a little bit more, BMO has bank accounts and borrowing options for university and college students, so enter on today. Actually, I have gotten word that it is actually all content creators, which I think is even better because content creators make me very excited to watch on the desk. So that show match on a Monday will be very, very appropriate there. If you want to learn more, though, please go ahead and check out BMO. I believe if you type !BMO, you'll learn a little blurb will come up and you can learn more about them just as well. Of course, if you're turning into this, we appreciate y'all for tuning in to Esports Analytics 101 Introduction to Esports Analysis. With that being said, my name is Ordo. With me has been Boyce and NXL, and we have been your panelists and hosts. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.